Hey, I want to talk to you about Spider-Man. A totally different Spider-Man than what we're used to. Like, this is just absolutely phenomenal. This latest movie, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse Part 1, has just completely blown my mind. Every bit of it. I know it's new, but I honestly think this might be one of the most groundbreaking Spider-Man movies that we've had to date. Like, it's really treading new ground. It's going in a completely different direction that we haven't seen in any of the other Spider-Man movies. And I'm really stoked about that. So, before we get into it, I'm going to have to give you a spoiler warning. And if you're okay with the spoilers, then you can go ahead and spoil that like button and you can spoil that subscribe button right before we get into the rest of this video. So, right now we've got Miles Morales, right? We've been following him in the first movie. Now we're in the second movie. And I'll be honest with you right now, I'm not totally familiar with Miles Morales. He's not the Spider-Man that I grew up with. I am completely aware that he is another Spider-Man, but I don't know his whole story. So this is really my introduction to Miles Morales instead of rather than the comic books. Like, I know his comics have been out for a while. I just stopped buying comic books by the time he was really prominent where I was shopping at. So we are introduced to this movie, and we've already been introduced to a lot of other Spider characters, but compared to the first movie, that's you could count on one hand if your hand had 7 fingers. In this latest Spider-Man movie, we're introduced to a setup of all the Spider-Man components. There's a part of the movie where we're introduced to the fate of Spider-Man. Not necessarily the end of his journey, but the components of his lifestyle, his or her lifestyle, because there's also female Spider characters, is you have to meet these criteria in order to fully flesh out your Spider persona, we'll say. So you need to make sure that you're bit by the spider, or some kind of recognition of power. You need to have the loss of somebody important. That's the recognition that it's honestly, I should be getting into the monomyth right here, the hero's journey, if you're familiar with that. We have the call to the adventure. That's getting bit by the spider. You have to lose somebody important, because once you're bit by the spider, you go and do something. Like Tobey Maguire goes wrestling. That's the refusal of the call. The true call is losing somebody important. That's what calls them into action. You lose your Uncle Ben, you lose your Gwen Stacy. Uncle Aaron is his name. In Miles Morales' case, that's his call to go out and do the things that he needs to do. It's a serious wake-up call for all these characters. Like, hey, you need to get it together and go out there and save the day. That's their recognition. And typically there is where they cross over into the unknown world, because they are now introduced to all these villains that show up. Like what J. Jonah Jameson is what always complaining about is, hey, now that Spider-Man's here, he's attracting all these terrible villains. We got to get rid of Spider-Man so we don't have the likes of Vulture, the Green Goblin coming in, tearing up the city, all that kind of stuff. Spider-Man also typically has some kind of interest, a strong bond with the character that they end up losing. In this case, Miles has Gwen Stacy's, or Ghost Spider, I think, as she's noted in there. Some people call her Spider-Gwen. I don't know if that's the same character. I should fact check that. It's kind of funny because he effectively loses her 3 times over the course of these 2 movies. You have your Spider characters balancing their normal life with their super life. They need to balance fighting crime with balancing keeping up with their loved ones and responsibilities like an occupation as such. So this is all proposed to you in the movie. Miguel O'Hara is this future Spider-Man, and he's telling you all this good stuff like, hey, you're destined to be going through these things. And honestly, I have a couple little questions about it, because we've already lost Uncle Aaron. Now that we've lost Uncle Aaron, I thought that was the call to power. But it's setting up for us to realize that losing Uncle Aaron wasn't Miles' true call to power. He is destined to lose his father, Jefferson Davis, who is going to be captain of the police force. It says you're going to lose the captain. All these different characters, they're related to the captain of the police force in some way, and they lose that character, which is supposed to be the true call to power. Like, yo, get it together, like really get it together. You thought it was something before? No, this is the real call to power right here. So with that in mind, we are in a very interesting place in the storytelling cycle. If we're still looking at the Monument, you have several antagonists getting in the way of Miles from accomplishing his objective, which is saving his father. We have Spot, the current main antagonist of the movie. He's the one who was introduced at the beginning. We have Miguel O'Hara, who is attempting to stop Miles Morales from pursuing the proposed future that he's going to have. And then we also have fate itself. Miles doesn't want to lose his father, but it's fate for him to lose his father, as according to Miguel O'Hara. The tricky part is, if Miles does manage to save his father, he could lose his entire universe because he's messed up the canon. Something else that's introduced in the movie is, if you don't follow the proper guidelines of meeting your spider criteria, you end up messing up the canon, what is supposed to happen in your timeline. You're messing up fate, and the way fate treats that is, we're just going to erase you from reality. You're gone. Goodbye. Out of here. So we're not even at the ordeal, the abyss, as such, as stated in the Monument. I think we're approaching the halfway point in the hero's journey, and we're about to see a whole lot of stuff happen in part 2, and I'm really stoked to see it, because I mean, part 1 has set the bar really high. The first Spider-Verse movie was really good. This movie is like, whoa, and that's a really high bar to match. So I'm very curious as to how this is going to play out. It's done a much better job at fleshing out all the characters and making them have a prominent role in the entire story than the first movie. What's super fascinating is we are on the cusp of an entirely new direction of Spider-Man. I mean, you take the Batman movies, yeah, they're all different Batman, but they're still Batman. They have all their gadgets and everything, just like Spider-Man. They're all Spider-Man, but Spider-Man typically has a bit more variation. You look at Tom Holland, he loses Uncle Ben. He goes wrestling. If you look at Andrew Garfield, I forget how he's goofing around, but he loses Gwen Stacy and her father. That's the captain of the police there. It's not directly the same character in Spider-Man as it would be in Batman. Batman makes minor changes to the story, but most novels of Batman stay very solid to the internal plot, and things get mixed up with how he has to react with his villains as far as his origin story. When it goes to Spider-Man, everybody has their own special way of tweaking about it. It's not the same character, just like all these Batman movies are not the same Batman necessarily. It's a different interpretation of it. But where it kind of diverges is Spider-Man. These are completely different Spider characters, and they've all been varied. Their stories have been mutated in a way to meet that fate, that consistent canon that they have. So Miles here is about to break that, and I have no idea where it's going to go, how it's going to happen, but I'm here for it, because they're breaking what we expect out of Spider-Man. Completely new grounds here is what they're shooting for, and I'm super stoked. So we'll see what it has entail for us. We've got to wait till next March, I believe. Maybe I'll have more Spider-Man content by then, because I'm really stoked about it. But that's all I've got for you today. I'll see you on the next one.